tell me how you got the inspiration to write Fallen Flowers.
So the title actually comes from my my spiritual path has a particular like guided meditation that where you visualize falling flowers coming out of the sky, like all over the earth. And so every once in a while, this kind of works into my music, I think, because I'm like thinking about it, I'm kind of embodying this imagery and interpreting it however I want to. And so, of course, in music, it kind of takes on different narratives. And so here, I'm imagining like these different kinds of falling flowers like coming out of the sky, and like they're embodying peace. And in the violin is kind of giving more character to each one. Like there's one flower and it's kind of like dancing in a particular way, or there's a group of flowers that are all kind of like buzzing around one another in a more like chaotic way, and or I have this other image of kind of like zooming out to see like where are these flowers coming from, and kind of looking like maybe into the stratosphere to see where the source of the flowers is, which is completely unclear, but it's kind of imaginative to try to imagine like where in the cosmos this is all happening. And so I'm kind of trying to show that in the music.
So, and you're also a dancer.
I am, yes. Yeah, I grew up studying classical Indian dance, the Odissi style, which is from the eastern coast of India.
And so when you compose something like Fallen Flowers, do you imagine movement as you're composing it?
There are definitely some of these gestures that are very influenced by gesture and movement. I think in general, I love thinking about gesture and music in terms of those like the micro sculpting of a phrase. And that really relates to dance a lot in how we're very particular about how we use our hands, and the exact gesture of like how the eyes follow the hands. It's all very prescripted. And so I definitely see that in the intention. Like I have a very clear intention of where I want each group of notes to go, and like how they should create little phrases. So that's like one answer. The other answer is just in terms of timing. Like there's a lot within this dance form that's very like, you have a very strong sense of rhythm because your feet are keeping the beat generally in classical Indian dance. But in Odissi, what's very particular is that your upper body is actually very free. So you kind of have this like rebounding against the beat going on while your legs are keeping the rhythm, and your upper body is like very fluid, but you always know what the beat is, but you can have this fluidity above it. And I think that's also that kind of comes in here as well with what we were talking about with how we can kind of like stretch and kind of know where the beat is, but then we align somewhere and we have a clear sense of where we are. Within it, there is a lot of freedom and fluidity.
Have you thought about dancing to this piece?
I remember you asked me in our original conversation. I haven't specifically thought of choreography yet, but I can see how that might work. I would need to kind of like think about it. There are a lot of, like in different projects, I have tried to bring in like either my dance style or kind of an interpretation of Odissi, which is more generally more slowed down, and kind of I'm infusing more of like modern elements into it, which generally works well with Western classical instruments. So that's probably something that I would do. But I think it would work really well for a solo dancer, thinking about as we're kind of like zooming in on each one of these flowers, and imagining what's the character of each one. I think that would work well for one dancer.
Well, in the very beginning when we were talking about this project, we had talked about what to base it on, this piece, right? And it sounds like it's you decided to come from, you had talked about more peace in the world, and you had talked about the environment right? Um, so how do you finally settle on what you want to write your piece about?
Yeah, that's
Like
a
I know sometimes I've heard some composers just start writing and then the inspiration comes after writing. Do you find the inspiration before writing, or is it not so separate that way? It's kind of
I
organic.
think it can work a variety of different ways. And sometimes it's like it's happening concurrently and I don't notice it until later, which is kind of fun. Especially with something like this where like I love these images or these images of the falling flowers. Like I love those images and I may have been thinking about them at a different time of day than the time of day that I was writing. And then later on, like looking back on it, like I can almost stitch those connections together. Like the same day that I was doing that, I was also doing that other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so those things may have been happening kind of at the same time, but I just didn't know. And I think that's kind of some of the fun of composing is that we're dealing with the unknown all the time and having to think of like, I'm writing this piece, but I have no idea what it's about. And I don't know where it's going. And I don't know what the next measure is going to be. But like looking back on it, there were signs. Like there was a path. I just didn't really see it. And it led me to where I am.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's kind of the beauty, like learning how to trust that. But coming back to your question, with this piece in particular, the way I got into it was thinking about, not about like, so I was really trying to connect to the instruments themselves because I'm much less familiar with percussion in general. Being a cellist, I'm like, it's very easy for me to think like a string player and just write a string part. And I really didn't want to have a violin solo with some tacked on like percussion sounds onto it. I really wanted to have something that sounded like it was really for the two of you to play together. And so the way that I first started generating ideas was to think of like, what if this was just a different instrument? What if it wasn't a violin anymore? What if it was like a violin plus percussion hybrid, like beast? Like what kind of sounds would it make? And how to really like conjoin your sounds rather than have a beautiful little solo over here and some banging over here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so like that is how I started generating ideas, is trying to think of like where like the attack, and like if there's a percussion attack, like where is the sustain in the violin, like what is the most natural connection between these two instruments. And so then things kind of, more and more ideas kind of happened after that.
As soon as you said that, it really made me think about the process of learning this with Maria,
Oh,
actually.
cool.
And it's true. It just learning my part was kind of interesting, but then I was thinking, okay, how does the percussion fit in with that? And it wasn't just like, it really needed to be integrated. Like the lines have to be integrated. And that in a way is harder because Maria's not somebody I normally work with. So we've kind of had to figure out how to mold those lines together.
I think that like some of the most fun experiences I've had with new music have been like doing that, like doing the things that are the least related to my cello training, like going into a hunting store to find like a goose honker, which was required for one piece that I was playing. Like there's sometimes you just have to like look at what you're doing and just laugh and just like embrace whatever it is that, you know, ridiculous situation.
It's funny that she says, okay, just tell me the dimensions of the wood planks. I'll go to the hardware store and have them cut them for me.
Exactly. It's like you would never be like, oh well, I'll tell you how big your violin should be and then they can cut it for you. You'll do great. The piece will be done.
Or how heavy the chopsticks should be, right?
Right, exactly.
Don't think about that. Wow.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the major influences in your music?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like some of the biggest influences are just coming from my background as a cellist and as a dancer. And so from cello, we have like what I really loved to play, what I was playing a lot, which is like Brahms chamber music and other like related styles. My heart was just totally in that. And on the other side of things, my heart was also totally in dancing and the kind of the sounds that I would hear that we were dancing to, which is Odissi music, which is kind of a fusion of Hindustani music and Carnatic music from India, and especially Hindustani music from the north. And so, you know, I was able to go to India and study a little bit of Hindustani music to try to bring it in to my work and see how I could kind of bring all these disparate connections together. And so you hear a little bit, I mean, in this piece, we don't hear that much of Hindustani music influence, but you know, a little bit, I think, definitely in my approach to kind of tonality and like having a drone there and seeing what kind of beautiful shimmering effects we can create over the drone. That's like one thing that I really love doing. And in terms of like composers, Reena Esmail is a huge influence. I mean, she also works with Hindustani music, and the way that she's been able to bring that in and experiment in like a universe of ways, really, like if you'd expect that a piece that involves Indian music influence would sound kind of like this thing, like one thing, like you're wrong. It can sound like anything. I think she's like a great example of how to explore that universe of options for how to create with multiple styles.
Did you actually go, did you like major in composition, or did you kind of just start composing and you just carried it through and kept going and kept going? Did you actually like decide, I'm going to go to school and study composition?
Well, a little bit of both, actually. I was playing cello mainly. That was like my focus in college. But I kind of started composing then too. So I was also like doing like the concerto competition and all this other stuff. But I was also taking classes, and the classes were becoming more and more interesting, to the point where I brought in a piece to be played by the Brown Orchestra, which we read one rehearsal when we had nothing else to do, which was like such a treat. And I got a sense of like, I almost felt like power hungry. I was like, they're all playing my thing. And so you kind of get this like really addicting feeling. That's what I felt in college. And then a variety of events transpired. I got tendonitis, and I was like, oh God, like it was really hard to like conceive of not playing. So composing was like my creative outlet at that point. And then I ended up getting a degree in music, like a liberal arts degree that combined like theory and history and composition. And then I got my master's in composition after that. So that was my choice of being like, okay, I want to actually pursue this thing on its own.
So tell me a little bit about some of the projects that you're excited about, that you're embarking on, or that have just happened.
Sure. Well, I just, speaking of dancing with instruments, I've just done a piece with WindSync, a fabulous wind quintet in Houston, and I'm dancing to it. So there's a video online. It's hosted by Society for Performing Arts Houston, so we've done a short piece that's on the theme of sacredness, and especially within the pandemic. So the piece is called Hold Sacred, and the video is cool. We've kind of done a bunch of different shadows of the musicians and shadows of me dancing, and we kind of intersect, and my arm is going through the French horn player at one point. It's very fun and gestural and imaginative. Yeah.
So that's a project that you just finished, right?
Yes.
What do you have coming up?
I'm also working on a piece for solo viola, and this will be for a doctoral student in South Carolina, Calvin Green, who's a fabulous violist, and he's got a grant from his university to commission a bunch of young composers. So I'm very excited to be part of that too. So that's premiering in the spring. And other things in the works, kind of like in discussion about them now. Doing one arrangement for the Carpe Diem string quartet down in Texas. A lot of Texas connections, so hope they can have something on a program in January. A lot of like concerts that are happening in January that were like, oh, we should have this thing for January. Like, okay, let's do it.
But this certainly has been a really fun project to do with you.
Yay, I'm so glad. It's really a treat to be able to do this in a pandemic and get to know you over the internet and get to know your playing and be able to like watch this thing come alive.
It's fun to actually work with the composer.
Well, it's fun on my end to work with a performer who, like, that makes sense of the music. And that's really it's where the magic happens for me.
We want to bring it alive, right?
Yeah.
I'm excited to see, I'm excited to record this. I hope we do a good job for you. But I'm really excited to see how, if you're inspired by our performance, to put it to movement.
I'm sure, yeah. It was sounding amazing in the reading, so I'm very excited.
Well, thank you.
Yay, thank you so much, Lucy. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, bye.
All right.